Look at my new nails. Hello. Oh, you know what? The new. Sorry, I'm squirreling before we even start. You know what the new shop has done for me?
What?
I don't feel the urge to get up and walk around to push the buttons anymore because I'm in a new location.
Because we're in a new location, so it's all different. And
Good morning and welcome to the Sun Dragon Sideshow.
the Dear Becky and Lizzie, we have no questions today.
I'm Rebecca. I'm the owner of Sun Dragon Art and Fiber on a very sunny, just outside of downtown day. I'm going to try that again. On a very sunny day, just outside of downtown Brevard, North Carolina. I will get that at some point.
I'm Liz. I'm the minion there.
I got to find a new, rhythm, right? Now that we're in this new location. It's sunny, but I'm trying the, what is that? Why do we have goop on the top of our...
I don't know.
That's icky looking. There's goop on the top of our lamp.
Don't look at it.
But it's there. I'm wondering if something got on it over where I keep it. I gotta not squirrel about that. But isn't that wasn't there yesterday?
No.
And I don't think my donut went anywhere near it. So what is that?
I don't know, but when I knit, everything wobbles.
Well, I'm also shaking the table. See, look.
Oh.
I'm shaking the table.
I was like, why?
That wasn't
when I
you.
knit,
Okay.
is the light wobbly?
I'm gonna try to ignore that there's goop on the light, and we'll clean it off later. But
Now
I was
I'm
going like
seeing all
that.
these circles when I close my eyes.
Because you stared at the light. What do you? Okay, this is what happens when we don't have questions.
There's goop on it, Liz. Look, there's goop on it. And then it shakes.
Because I'm shaking the table with my... Okay, anyway. I'm so powerful. No, I'm not.
I'm like, how is my knitting making the light shake?
Why is it all about you, Liz? Okay.
Well, I didn't see you shaking the table, but I'm like sitting here knitting, and I'm like, are my needles clacking that many waves that it's causing the light to shake?
Not
Sorry.
that you have to send us innocuous questions, but if you send us questions, we won't do this.
Maybe they us doing this.
We will still do this, though, so it doesn't matter. So one of the things I can talk about, I started a gauge swatch with my Tasagari that we talked about yesterday on the VSC, and we're already down 9 skeins of this stuff. I think even though one person needs to check their email because the payment didn't go through, and I don't really want to call them out on camera because it's not like a bad thing. It just means their payment didn't go through. But I think it's still not an online inventory. I think it still gets reserved because they're waiting for the payment. But I started my gauge swatch. I'm trying to get it so it's in the light with the neutral one that I'm using. The oh, good, it's right here because I don't remember the name. The Takita that I want to use. And isn't that lovely? Like, when I make the sweater, this color fade will not be as gradual. It will be faster because of the spread out of the stitches. This is what happens when you cast on just over 30 stitches. You get a gradual thing like this. And honestly, this is on a 6. It feels lovely. This feels, it's not going to be like super silky, because it's got 60% wool, but for having 60% wool,
feels nice.
This feels nice. Like Ito, I still think even Ito feels nice, but some people will go, no, that's super scratchy. And wool allergies, I know, it's a totally different thing. But this feels a lot softer than I would expect Noro in general, because people have, there's this assumption that Noro is scratchy. And some of that's because it's under-processed. And some of that is because the under-processing means that you will find debris. Vegetation. There's all these fancy words for it. You'll find sticks and hay and, stuff in it. I am really looking forward to making a sweater out of this. And I mentioned that I'm going to use the leftovers of the ivory color. That was my main color in my Koivua. My brain was reaching for words as the contrast color in my forest land. And the forest land, it has like angled branches or leaves that go this way. And it's like, and that's why I think it would look really cool. I've made one with sweeping stuff. I've done a lot that could just kind of fan out, and now I'm going to do something that's more angular. And it's hopefully going to satisfy my need to make a neutral sweater, because this is neutral with like, I'm trying to catch the light a little bit, with a hint of blue in it.
And it's going to stripe more like this, where, like, if you look at my torso, and it's upside down, but it's wider stripes.
Look at my torso. Just look at it. Sorry.
It's wider stripes than the sleeves.
Yeah, because there's smaller number of stitches for this. That's part of the beauty of working with a yarn that changes colors. Because depending on the width of what you make, it is going to change colors at a different rate. And so sometimes it's not even worth trying to match things. You know, it's just let it happen. Just let it happen. Like, that's another life lesson. Sometimes, not all the time, just let it happen.
Yeah.
And then if it's something you need a little more work on or a little more control over, color manipulate. I haven't made one of those videos for my life lessons from knitting and crochet on my tips and tricks channel in a while.
Yeah.
But there's one right there. I'll probably forget by the time I film. So
and Noro colors are so pretty that like there's always with Ito, and I love Ito, but there's always a color in the ball that I'm like, I don't like that color. But if you pull that color out, it kills the whole ball of yarn. Like
there is a, I mean, you can pull that color out.
You can,
but there's a rhyme and reason to the craziness of
like
Noro colors.
Putting salt on Rice Krispie treats. Like it just adds something that, you know, you're not expecting.
So one of the things we can do with today's episode is we can talk about gauge swatching.
Yes.
And I could measure this. That's why I was looking over there. Here's the thing about not having fully unpacked yet. I don't know where my open gauge swatches are, like measurement things. But the Chowgu ones, I don't need to take out of plastic. So let me go grab one of those.
We've been trying to unpack, and it's not like, you know, oh, we've thought about it. No, we've actually been trying to unpack. The problem is, and it's a good problem to have. Go get it.
It's still a problem, but it's a good problem to have.
People keep walking in. Like, we're glad everybody keeps, but like eventually it's going to mean coming in on a day off.
We need our day
and
off.
We need a day off. So, we've been trying. It's not like, you know, we're sitting around the shop going, gee, we should think about unpacking. No, we've been
and
trying.
Here's the thing. It's not really something that someone can help us with, because we need to know where things are going and what's thrown out and what's not. And we know we have people who want to help.
Yeah.
And who would help, but then we would have to spend just as long as we're spending unpacking or trying to unpack, trying to relearn where everything is. Yeah. It's going to be hard enough with us being in charge of it and doing it ourselves. But so let's talk about gauge swatches. So and I know we've talked about it before, but I want to make a sweater. And honestly, I need to find out what can you check for me? My pattern is not printed yet. So it is, I would check it on my phone, and my phone is recording right now. So if you can, I think it probably is in the Ravelry listing what the gauge should be. We're going to find out. Forest Land by Jennifer Steingass. So what I've done, and I have a whole video on how to do a gauge swatch on my tips and tricks channel. But, a gauge, like the gauge listing on a sweater is usually 4 inches or 10 centimeters, 4x4. A 4x4 block should be so many stitches by so many rows. And if you might notice, this is bigger than 4 inches, or at least I hope it is. So
it says 20 stitches and 28 rows equals 4 inches.
Okay. So in stockinette is the other thing it says. Yes. So I had already looked at the pattern. Keep that nearby because I'm going to forget. The 20 stitches is the one I have to remember. I already looked at the pattern, and the main needle is a 6. So I grabbed my 6 circular needles, and I cast on more than 20 stitches. And the reason I did that is you want a flat space in the middle. Honestly, this isn't 4 stitches. This isn't 4 inches long yet. This is not like, some people will say this is not a true gauge swatch yet. But I have more than an inch or two here. That's the important thing. The most important thing for me is that I cast on over 30 stitches because I want to measure in the center. If you only cast on 20 stitches and knit so many rows, like that's what some people do. They see that and they say, okay, I'm going to cast on 20 stitches and I'm going to knit 24 rows, and then I'll measure and see if that's a 4x4 square. There's several things that will be complicated in that, which you might later say, my swatch lied to me. Not the least of which is stockinette, which when you do it flat is knitting a row and purling a row. There's a whole other issue with if the pattern's in the round, which this one is. I should probably have gauge swatched in the round. And I'm breaking that rule because I know that my knits and purls are pretty consistent. If your knits and purls have a different gauge to them, if like your purls are looser than your knits, that's what another reason you might say my gauge swatch lied to me. But stockinette curls at the edges. Like if I turn this around to the back side, like see this curl here? This curls up, and you can flatten it to try to measure it. Then again, move all of our fun stuff out of the way here a little bit. I love this yarn, it's so great. And random sweaters people have been looking at, and this is life in a yarn shop. If I could spread this out and try to spread out the curls, first of all, they're not fully going to spread out, and then I have a danger of pulling on it to try to measure it, and that's going to throw off my measurements. But these edge stitches just they're called the selvage. Same
and they
thing.
want to curl too.
And they want to curl, and they don't often look like a whole stitch. And they're really hard to count because it's hard to see it as a whole stitch. So that's going to curl up, and you're going to go to measure and say this isn't 4 inches across. When your 20 stitches might actually be a full 4 inches, and that's lovely, but you can't tell because it's curling under.
Well, it's like I'm looking at your swatch right now, and it's curling in 2 different directions.
Yeah.
The top and the bottom are
does.
curling up, and the sides are curling back.
Yes.
So trying to manipulate that flat changes how everything lays.
And you might pull on it in a direction. You might get bigger stitch, like your stitches might be bigger than they actually are if you're pulling on it to flatten it. So I have done, there should be 4 inches in the middle here that I can measure that aren't curling. And I'm going to put it on a flat table, and I'm going to do my best not to tug at it too much to make it fit gauge, because that is not going to be accurate. Some people will say, okay, now you also need to knit more than 4 inches this way. I tend to cheat a little. I'll tell you why. And that doesn't mean that what I do is right. It's just what I'm willing to work with and take the hit on if it doesn't work. I also, I still have it on the needles, but I have it on the cable. I don't have it. If you're knitting on straight needles, it's best to bind off, because like having it up on the needle here is going to pull at your stitches. So I've moved it to the cable in the center, which hopefully shouldn't pull on anything. It's smaller than the width of my stitches. And I can get a measurement away from where the stitches are still hanging on the needle to hopefully get an accurate stitch count. I don't block my gauge swatches. And if I was really, really concerned about it, I would. What we always say here on the show, though, is, and there are people who really are adamant that you should block your gauge swatch because you don't know how your yarn's going to behave. And some yarn expands when it's blocked, and some yarn doesn't. And some of that depends on how water-soaked it is when you lay it out. Some of it depends on how much you pull at it when you're blocking it. There's so many things that can affect that. I like to make sure I know what's going to happen if, say, I don't get around to blocking. This is what's going to happen.
Well, and if you are knitting to fit you, and you've blocked your gauge swatch, your knitting might not fit until you block it, and you might not know, is it going to fit?
Yeah, trying it on as you go is tough when you might block differently than it just naturally hangs. I am also super cautious when in blocking a gauge swatch. Try to block if you choose to, which is the more accurate way to do it. Try to block it the way that you will block your finished product. And for some people who take it and they make their square and they soak it and then they get the water out of it and then they stretch it to make it a perfect square. That's different than what's going to happen. You have to be pulling and tugging and, oh, look, you can see. I got squirreled for a second. I'll show you that in a second. If you're not going to be pulling and precisely measuring and yanking with your finished sweater, that's not going to be accurate. And the other thing is, if you block your gauge swatch, make sure you unpin it when it's fully dry and like let it hang and do its thing, because measuring it while it's pinned is not going to be the same measurement as what's going to happen after it's done blocking. Like you might pin it to the 4 inches or something, which again, you should do something bigger in my opinion. And then when you unpin it, suddenly it shrinks down to 3 inches or something else because the yarn itself shifts. It's not going to stay in the pinned shape. So I like to measure what's going on with this.
Quick question on a sideline, because this kind of adds into, because I have seen people come in with a gauge swatch, and they did stockinette in a needle size, and they measured it and it didn't come out right, and so they just did 4 or 5 rows of
I haven't gotten to that yet. I was going to get to that,
and
we can address it right now. I am not a fan of doing multiple needle sizes on the same swatch, because what's underneath, like what Liz is saying, is they do a part and then they do a few rows of garter to be a border and then they start knitting with the other needle. Like you need to knit a full 4 to 5 inches past that border to really, because that border is going to pull at your stitches. And you're not going to get an accurate measurement right above that. Like everything you do before you change affects your change. Like if I didn't get the right size with this, which I'm going to measure and see in a minute, I would either rip this out and do a new one, or if I want to see how it compares and how it feels compared to a different needle, I will start a new swatch. I'm a really big fan, and here's where people are like, I need to get enough to swatch too. I reuse this in my sweater, and some of why I reuse this in my sweater is because I don't block. So, but yeah, I'm not a big fan. Some people will swear by it, but then we have people who come in and they've knit a couple inches with one needle, and then rows of knitting, and then stockinette with another needle and rows of knitting, and they're like, but they all measure the same, and it's like because it's all pulling at everything is affecting everything else.
The needle swings were big. Like it wasn't like they went a 0.5 millimeter different. It was like 2 or 3 millimeters, and everything measured the same.
And some of that could be a psychological, like shifting how you knit, and some of that could be you're really not far enough. Like with the tighter knitting below is pulling at the looser knitting you're trying to do above, and because this just happened, I have to go back to this now. So this is my original ranunculus. This is why it's nice to wear the ranunculus over something, because this is a sport/DK weight on a size 10 needle. This is the first one I ever did on Alba, but it's a really loose gauge because look, you can see
You did a picard tug and everything.
It's like, look, I've got plaid underneath. That's really funny. Peekaboo.
It's like those new glass doors where when you go into a bathroom, they all fog, and then open the door. Hello,
privacy. Hello, privacy. Okay.
This will be the episode you're down.
This would be the. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do now. This is the one this is the gauge. Like, it's best to measure your stitches on a flat surface with a flat measuring device of some kind. Like, I know we, as knitters, we all love fabric or tape measures like this. Fabric tape measures, I still trust them, but not necessarily for gauge swatches, so I want to be super accurate because they can stretch over time. I also saw this post on Knit and Chat where someone was like, I got sent these 2 fabric tape measures and they don't even like match. And it's because one was in Chinese inches, which I didn't know was a thing. But Chinese inches are a different length than US inches. So, and you might not be aware of it and just see inches. That's okay. So, like, make sure you've got something, like, even if it's a school ruler, that can be good because it's flat and it's a hard substance and it's not going to change over time. I'm hydrating. Look at me, Liz. Okay.
I know.
I like the ones with the little windows, and the Susan Bates one that we sell that we might have one in stock right now. We're like, we need to restock on everything right now. The Susan Bates one that we have has a little 2-inch window, like L shape in it. And we sell ones from Katrinkles that has a little 2-inch window in it. This one's 4.5 inches, so you have to be careful because it's bigger than 4 inches. But it's a rigid, I mean, it's flimsy like this, but it's rigid plastic. And you can lay it, you can have a window where when you lay it on top, you can really see and line up with your stitches. And one knit stitch is a V. And I find stockinette where you have all the V's on one side is much easier to measure and count. And when I do this, I would put it, like if you're using a ruler, you're going to be counting the V's sitting above your straight edge. With these windows, you get to count the V's that are inside, and like two strands making a V is 1 stitch. And I'm making sure I'm not catching any of the curls on the side. But I just like the flatness because then again, we're not pushing and pulling. Like if this was a longer gauge swatch, I wouldn't be pulling to make it lie flat. I'd get an even more accurate measurement. The other thing is, I know we all love, like 1 inch is so easy to count. 1 inch in one part of your square may not be exactly the same as 1 inch on another part of your square because we are not machines. I'd like to think, we all like to think that we could knit at a really regular pace, but there may be some inconsistencies. That's another reason when people block that it might help settle and make them more even, but really be careful that you're not stretching your swatch out.
Well, and when we measure like even 2 inches, we tend to measure in several places on the swatch.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to move this up so it's not at the bottom. And so measuring 2 inches and multiplying by 2 can get you your 4-inch measurement. Again, 4 inches may seem weird, but it's bigger than 1 inch and it's 10 centimeters. So the person who devised this and set it in place for the rest of humanity was using the metric system. So, but this window's kind of nice. The Susan Bates one, I'll measure 2 inches in the window. And then if there's a question, like it's just under a whole stitch at the edge, I will use the outside edge to measure 4 inches. So I'm lining it up with the side of one of my V's, either pointing down or pointing down usually is easier for my brain to think about. And sometimes I use something that's thinner than my finger because it's not like I have fat fingers. It's like fingers tend to be bigger than stitches when you're dealing with yarn like this. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4. It looks like it's 4.5 to 1 stitch, so I'm going to go all the way across. That already tells me my gauge is probably not going to be right for this sweater, but I could be wrong. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm getting 9 stitches by 2 inches, which means I'm going to have 18, but I'm going to keep going. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. I'm at 18. Yeah, 18 is what 9 times 2. So
you need to go up needle sizes.
Well, I'm going to talk about that in a second. But you tell them why while I count in a different place.
So when you don't have enough numbers,
I'm going to have to go down needle sizes, but go ahead. Talk through it.
I thought you wanted okay.
Talk through it.
Talk through it every time.
Talk through it.
So
I have 18 stitches fitting into 4.
stitches, and you need 20 stitches.
Yes.
So you need more stitches, which means your stitches need to be smaller. And Yes. So you've got to go down a needle size.
I might go down 2 needle sizes actually, but I'll try just 1.
Yeah, you all the gauge swatching you have done, you generally know.
I kind of know. It doesn't always work out. Here's my thing about... Whoop, I'm wearing a clip-on earring, and it just decided to go wee. Here's so what Liz is saying is, yeah, I kind of know. Maybe I might get a half stitch out of each needle size I go down in this middle range. Although I like this fabric so nice. We got to see we so much right now. We have to see if I like it when it's smaller. That's the weirdest thing. This is a DK on a 6, and I'm getting 18. Like, you never know what's going to happen until you knit it, and not everyone knits the same. So Liz could do the same thing on a 6 and hit gauge, and you know
she won't. Yes, she could.
So right now, and I haven't even addressed rows. That's a whole nother thing, which I'll get into in a second. But right now, if I decided to just make the size sweater I want to make with these needles, with the gauge being what it is. I don't have the calculator to do it here, but we're not going to do all the magic math right now. But my stitches are too big. There's too few of them. This is the flip side. This is why I said talk it through. We have to talk it through every time. Is 18 stitches are fitting into this window, and I need 20. I need more of them to fit into this window, so they need to be smaller. So I need to go down needle sizes, because Liz's first impulse was you need to get a bigger needle, because we need more bigger fits together in our brains.
When I first started knitting and I had listened to you talk it out, I knew it by heart, how to do it. And then I would say it and people would go, no, that's not right. And then my brain would try and definitely. So
talking it through helps. And visualizing it helps process in the head. But I am 2 stitches fewer than what I need in that window, which means casting on the number of stitches for my size, it's a half stitch per inch that I'm off. But when you multiply that over 40 inches, that can drastically change the size of your sweater. Like, I tell the story when I teach intro classes of the first sweater I made. I only measured an inch. I did what I thought was right. I knit a gauge swatch. It was for my then boyfriend. I knit a gauge swatch and I measured an inch. And I had 7 stitches per inch, and I needed 7.5 stitches per inch. So I needed tighter, I needed smaller stitches. And I just said, instead of going to Walmart at the time, that's what I did, and getting another needle, I said, I will just pull the yarn tight. I will just knit tight for a 50-inch sweater for my boyfriend. And I always tell people, it's really hard to control how you knit and change how you knit. Change the size of the tool you're using, which determines the size of your stitch, because it's the tool of the needle combined with your personal tension. That's why the same needle is not going to produce the same result for everybody, because your tension is the other factor in there, and your tension is hard to control over a long period of knitting. You're going to ebb and flow, but you're going to hit a certain stride. What you do have control over is the tool, and the circumference of that tool can change the size of your stitch more reliably than you're trying to adjust your tension. It's like a machine where you can adjust the tension on your bobbin. That's a machine. You're not a machine. So I went ahead and knit the sweater and thought I was pulling tight the whole time. And it was a dress on him when I was done. Like, I tell people his chest hair poked out the top. He's like, I can't wear this to a family dinner we were going to. We found someone who was much taller and much heavier than him, and it fit him like a glove. But I learned my lesson is all that time and energy, because I didn't want to buy another, what at the time was probably a $7 needle. It would have worked out better for all my time and energy and commitment to change the size of my tool. So I'm already on a 6 with this. So the other thing that I was going to say is I might jump down 2 needle sizes instead of trying again with a 5. It sounds crazy that I might try again with a 4, but if I try with a 4 and my gauge comes out to say a 21 or something, like if it comes out on the flip side, I know the 5 is going to be my best bet without having to do the 5 and then find out, which could have worked. but then find out I have to try again with a 4. Because if I try on a 4 and it's perfect, then I've knit 2 swatches instead of 3. And even if the 4 doesn't work, I might still be able to say, I don't need to knit a 3rd swatch. The 5 is my best bet.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm probably going to go with.
You could knit the 4 and go, I don't like the fabric.
I don't like the fabric. And then I have to do magic math and figure out what the heck I want to do. That's a whole nother ball game, and I'll try to let you know what I think about that. So last thing before we go today is I'm going to try to line up. It's a little harder to measure rows because this slanty V going from the whole bottom to the whole top is hard to like fully accurately count. And the other thing that I have found is that when it's really hard for me to get both my stitch gauge and my row gauge to fit what a pattern is telling me. And if I can't get them both to fit, I'm going to go for stitches over rows almost every time, depending on the construction. But when it's a top down like this, I'd rather have control over how it fits this way and fiddle with this way. So I remember way back when I saw someone giving the advice of, well, if your row gauge isn't working, then knit with one needle and purl with another. And I'm like, who has time for that? And that might be really crazy. And that could be a solution, but I'd rather fiddle with length, even if it's a raglan seam, like I might have to go longer or shorter. I haven't found a sweater that is completely wrecked for me to not have the row gauge right if the stitch gauge was right. So
and if the sweater is side to side construction, you want row gauge.
Yeah, that's one of the things. It's whatever's controlling your circumference of your sweater is probably the one you want to be more accurate. So, because you can fiddle with the rest. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I think I've got roughly 11 stitches for 2 inches, which means 22, and I think that said 24. So I'm close, but not quite right. But I need to go down
by 28.
By 28. So that's another thing. I'm going to check again when I get my stitch gauge right. Then I will check my row gauge. But I know both need to be smaller right now. So I will keep y'all posted on that. I may do a separate gauge on a separate needle. I have 4 balls of this. So I may start with a different ball of it to see if I like the fabric when it's the right gauge. 20 stitches for 4 inches is more of a classic worsted weight gauge. So it shouldn't feel tight with a DK yarn, but not all yarns are the same. So I'm going to find out as I go, hello, there's my dress. I'm going to find out when I try this again. And that's why I do it. That's why I put in the time now and I talk about it for a full half hour on our show, because I want to put in the work now. That's annoying before I put in like weeks of work on the sweater and find that it doesn't fit. I mean, the worst thing would be if it was too small, in my opinion. Like right now, it would be massively bigger than I want it to be. And I might be okay with that because I can at least get it on. And you love big stuff, right?
I tend to not gauge swatch a lot. There are times that I do when I have to do magic math. But I tend not to gauge swatch a lot because I know that going up needle sizes and doing the biggest size in the pattern is going to make a massive sweater, which is what I'm going
Which is what she wants. I like ones that either have the appropriate ease in them, which is part of that is owning the shop and needing to convey that to people when they try the pattern. Or I like ones that just have a certain fit to them. And so I'm going to try that, because I would like this, if I'm putting all this energy in, to come out correctly. So, and even when you go through all of those steps, sometimes it won't fit right. And some of that could be your stress levels have changed over time. And so how you knit, like my Scrappy Granny T, I'm trying to remember names, has a different gauge at the bottom than at the top. My crochet gauge changed over time. I loosened up over time. That's okay though, because it's a loose fitting garment. But that can happen. And that's not to dissuade you from trying to make a sweater. That's just, you might want to check your gauge. And if it's really annoying you, like, because your gauge seems to be changing, you may want to change your needle size in the middle of a project. But usually that doesn't happen, or it's not that extreme. But who knows? So, anyway, we are going to go get started for the day. We have a little over 10 minutes till the shop's going to open. So look at that. We filled time. I found something to do.
We always find something to talk about.
Tomorrow night, this yarn is going to be on sale until next Tuesday with whatever we have in stock, which is going fast, but that's okay. If and when we'll get it back in. There's already this color. So the pretty rainbow color was back ordered before we even got our shipment. This pretty color, which is the Suru, is already back ordered online. We can't get more in. We'll just see. I think it's going to be lovely when I make this sweater, and we'll get stuff in as we can. Right now, we're just trying to restock on all the basics as we can from moving. So, tomorrow night, virtual sit and stitch. It feels like it's already the weekend, but it's not yet.
I know.
Friday night, 7 to 9 p.m., U.S. Eastern Time. Get in with the shop phone number.
828-877-3550.
And we don't have sit and stitch this weekend because we need to rest. That's the whole thing. The shop's not getting done because we need to actually rest. But then we'll see you all next week. And next week is leading up to all the big stuff like Black Friday and Small Business Saturday and then Cyber Monday. And we'll talk about that next week. So.
What?
Thing.
Oh. Like, subscribe, ring the bell. All the fun stuff.
I was trying to mouth it to her and that doesn't work. Our numbers are going up and our viewership's going up, and that's super cool. So if you haven't yet, please consider subscribing. It's free to do so. And it helps the YouTube algorithm, let other people know that we exist. Woohoo!
And when we hit 2,000 subscribers, we'll have a big YouTube sale.
And we are getting close to only 200 more subscribers to have that happen. That's doable, people. It won't be as big as our 1,000th sale, but, it'll be a sale. So, hey. All right. We'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.